By the time Sienna's helicopter finally reached me, the filthy brown water was already lapping at the edge of the roof. I was standing on top of Burr County Pump Station 4, one arm wrapped tight around a ventilation stack, while the flood below tore through the parking lot like it was nothing. My truck had been swallowed by the current 20 minutes earlier. I watched a propane tank spin past the building, tossed around like an empty soda can. Then I heard it, the unmistakable chop of rotor blades cutting through the rain. Crosswind Rescue 3 came over the tree line from the south, nose down, fighting the storm. I knew that aircraft before I could even make out the tail number. I'd signed its flight release myself that morning. But more than that, I knew the pilot. Captain Sienna Holston. My wife. The helicopter circled once, its searchlight sweeping across the roof before stopping dead on me. I raised both arms, my heart hammering. She saw me. There was no way she didn't. The aircraft hovered 50 feet off the western edge, and the rescue specialist slid the cabin door open. My radio crackled to life. Pump 4, Rescue 3. Read. Confirm you're alone. I pulled the waterproof handheld from my jacket, my fingers numb. Confirmed. Roof access is gone. South wall is taking debris impacts. Then Sienna's voice came through directly. I see you. Her voice should have been the best sound I'd heard all night. Instead, she said, I need you to hold. Hold? For what? We have a priority extraction 2 miles upriver. I thought I'd misheard her. Dispatch assigned you here. I know. Then extract me. Now. Read. I need 10 minutes. A section of fencing slammed into the pump station hard enough that the roof shifted under my boots. You don't have 10 minutes. The building is reinforced concrete. The transformer shed was reinforced too. It left 5 minutes ago. Her rescue specialist leaned toward the cockpit, and I couldn't hear what he said. Then Sienna answered someone on another channel. When she came back to me, her tone had changed completely. Damon Kersey is stranded at the Riverbend Emergency Annex. I stopped looking at the water. Damon. Her ex-husband. They'd been married for 4 years before I ever met her. He worked as a disaster logistics consultant for Belmere County now. What condition is he in? Stable. Is the annex flooding? Access roads are cut. That isn't what I asked. Silence. I knew Riverbend Annex, concrete emergency services building. 2 stories, backup generator, roof landing markings. Higher ground than Pump 4 by almost 14 feet. Is water inside the building? No. Then why are you leaving a life safety extraction to move someone from a dry building? He needs to get to the county command post. Why? He has the regional logistics package. That can be transmitted. Not all of it. I looked down. Water was now breaking against the roof. Sienna. Dispatch marked this structure at immediate risk. I know what dispatch marked. Then follow the assignment. Her answer came back harder. I am pilot in command and I am director of operations. That title didn't matter to the flood, but it mattered to Crosswind Rescue Aviation. I'd spent 13 years in commercial helicopter operations. I didn't fly rescue missions anymore, but every aircraft Crosswind launched operated under a dispatch and flight release system my department controlled. Sienna was chief pilot. I was director of operations. On paper, our responsibilities were cleanly separated. She controlled the safe conduct of an aircraft once it launched. I controlled whether Crosswind had operational authority to launch and what contractual mission it had been released to perform. Marriage had nothing to do with either job. At least it wasn't supposed to. Rescue 3, your active mission is Pump 4 for life safety extraction. Sienna answered, I am temporarily diverting for county continuity. Who authorized that? County command? Name them. No answer. Sienna, who authorized the diversion? Damon called me directly. There it was. Not dispatch. Not the county emergency director. Damon. Then it is not an authorized diversion. He has information they need. You do not abandon an immediate rescue because your ex calls your personal phone. The rescue specialist looked toward me from the open door. Even through the rain and rotor wash, I could see he was uncomfortable. Sienna said, I am coming back. When? 10 minutes. No. Read, complete the assigned extraction. Her voice dropped. Do not use your position to make this personal. I actually laughed one sharp, bitter sound into the radio. You are leaving your husband on a flooding roof to fly your ex out of a dry emergency building. And I'm the one making it personal? The helicopter moved sideways. Not toward me. Away. I stared at it, my blood running cold. Sienna? No answer. Rescue 3, acknowledge. The aircraft turned upriver. Its searchlight swept across me once more, then disappeared into the rain. I was alone again. At 7:38 p.m., I called Crosswind Dispatch. Marta Duval answered, "Reed? Rescue 3 says they have a temporary county priority diversion." "No, they don't." She went quiet. "What? Who changed mission 3187? I thought you did." My grip tightened around the radio. "I am standing on pump 4. "I know. Then how exactly would I be sitting at operations approving a command transfer?" She started typing. The mission category changed at 7:34. From what to what? Life Safety 1 to Emergency Command Support. User? A pause. Sienna. Chief Pilot credentials allowed her to amend mission notes. They did not allow her to replace operational authorization. Was there a county authorization number? No. Then reverse it. I can't while Rescue 3 is airborne without an operations override. You're speaking to operations. Another impact shook the building. This one cracked something below me. Marta heard it. "Reed? What was that?" Her voice changed immediately. "I'm calling mutual aid." "Do it." Crosswind Rescue 2 was already carrying a pregnant woman from a flooded subdivision. Rescue 1 was refueling. Rescue 4 was grounded by a tail rotor chip warning. Marta called Belmere Fire, then State Emergency Management. A volunteer swiftwater team was closer than any available aircraft. Estimated arrival, 22 minutes. I looked at the river. I may not have 22. Can you get higher? I am standing on the highest part. Stay on the radio. For the next 17 minutes, I listened to a dispatcher keep her voice calm while the pump station slowly came apart beneath me. The west stairwell collapsed first. Then a roof panel near the generator room dropped 6 inches. I moved toward the ventilation housing. At 7:51, I heard another aircraft overhead and looked up. Not Sienna. A state police helicopter crossed northbound without slowing. It had another assignment. At 7:54, Rescue 3 checked back into the company frequency. Dispatch 3. Riverbend pickup complete. En route pump 4. Marta answered before I could. 3. Pump 4 structure condition has deteriorated. Swiftwater team is 3 minutes out. Sienna said, "We can beat them." Marta looked at the tracking screen on her end. "No, you're 9 minutes." I keyed the radio. "Stay clear, Sienna." "Reed. The building is shifting. I don't want rotor wash over it. I can hoist you. You could have hoisted me 16 minutes ago." She went silent. Then I made the wrong call. That was not the time for that conversation. "Stay clear." The Swiftwater team reached me at 7:58. They came in from the east using a rigid inflatable boat tied to a fire rescue truck with a downstream safety line. The boat couldn't reach the roof directly because debris had jammed against the building. A firefighter threw me a line. I clipped into the rescue belt they sent across and jumped. The water was colder than I expected. For 6 seconds, I was under. Then 2 firefighters dragged me over the side of the boat. Pump 4 lost part of its southern roof before we reached the road. I watched it collapse from the rescue truck. If Sienna had returned when she said she would, she still might have reached me. If the Swiftwater crew had been 5 minutes later, I might have been inside the building when it failed. Neither possibility mattered as much as the decision that created them. At Belmere Fire Station 7, a paramedic checked me for hypothermia while I called Marta again. "Where is Rescue 3? County Command Pad." "Why?" "Sienna says Damon has to brief logistics." "Any medical issue with him?" "No." "Was Riverbend Annex ever designated evacuation priority?" Marta hesitated. "No." "Who approved his pickup?" "Nobody in dispatch." I closed my eyes. "Pull the mission history." I already did. "And the category change was entered under Sienna's chief pilot login?" "I know. There's something else." "What?" "She changed the diversion reason after landing." I sat up. "To what?" Weather avoidance. For several seconds, the fire station around me seemed to disappear. What does the original event log show? User edit at 8:06. She changed County Command pickup to temporary weather diversion Riverbend LZ. Was weather preventing access to Pump 4 when she left? No. Flight track shows she was already in hover. She hadn't merely made a terrible choice. She had changed the operational record afterward to make the choice look different. Lock the mission file. Already done. Marta, who currently has operational credentials above dispatcher level. You, me, Sienna, safety director, and the company president. Disable Sienna's. Another pause. Read. Do it. Okay. And initiate mutual aid transfer for every active crosswind rescue assignment. Her voice sharpened. All of them? Yes. We have 6 aircraft available tonight. 5. 3 is coming out of service immediately. What about the others? State Aviation in Archer County have capacity coming online after 8:30. Transfer every life safety mission before we stop launching. Marta understood. You're calling a fleet standown? Yes. A company-wide standown during a flood was not something I took lightly. It was also not something I could avoid after the chief pilot had redirected a rescue aircraft outside dispatch authority and then altered the mission record after the fact. Operational control depended on dispatch records. If senior flight management could rewrite one diversion to hide why it happened, I could not certify the system while the same credentials remained active. For the next 40 minutes, Crosswind finished the rescues already in progress and handed pending calls to state police. National Guard Aviation, Archer County, and 2 neighboring contractors activated under the Regional Disaster Compact. Nobody was abandoned because I wanted to make a point. At 8:47, the last Crosswind aircraft landed. Marcia, read the fleet board to me. Rescue 1 down. 2 down. 3 on pad at command. Tell them return to Belmere Regional without passengers. For already maintenance grounded. 5 down. 6 2 minutes at 8:51. Rescue 6 landed. I gave the instruction. Crosswind fleet status, operational safety standown. No launch without Director of Operations and Safety concurrence. Marta entered it. 6 company aircraft turned red on the status board. Grounded. At 9:03, Sienna called me. I answered from a borrowed sweatshirt in the fire station kitchen. What did you do? I suspended operations. You grounded the fleet during a flood? After transferring every active rescue to mutual aid. You had no reason to ground 5 other aircraft because you're angry at me. This is not because you left me. It's because you changed a life safety mission without operational authorization and then altered the diversion record after landing. Silence. You saw that? Marta saw it. Another silence. Then Sienna said, I changed the description because the original wording made it look like I flew a personal favor. You did. Damon needed to reach command. Then County Command could have requested him. They were overloaded. So you bypassed dispatch. He had logistics data they needed. And I had flood water breaking over my roof. Her breathing changed. Reed, I thought the building would hold. You are a rescue pilot. You do not get to replace the risk classification with what you hoped would happen. I came back after you got Damon. She stopped. The fleet stays down until safety audits mission control access, interviews the crew, and verifies every active aircraft can operate under records we can trust. You're going to destroy our county contract. No. You risked it when you used a rescue helicopter like it belonged to you. The line went quiet. Then she said the one thing that told me she still didn't understand. You would never do this if it had been anyone except Damon. I looked through the station window at floodwater covering half the highway. You would never have left me there if it had been anyone except Damon. I ended the call. Less than an hour earlier, Sienna had flown away while I stood on a roof that was beginning to collapse. Now every helicopter under her command sat on the ground. By morning, the county would want to know why. And the answer was already sitting in Crosswind's locked dispatch log. At 6:20 the next morning, Crosswind's board placed Sienna on administrative leave. At 6:27, they did the same to me. I was sitting in the conference room at Belmere Regional Airport, wearing borrowed jeans from the fire station and yesterday's shirt, when Company President Hollis Vian slid 2 letters across the table. Sienna sat 6 chairs away. Neither of us had gone home. Hollis looked at me first. Read, this is not discipline. It feels well formatted for something that isn't discipline. It is a conflict measure. I initiated the stand-down under my operations authority. I know. And safety agreed at 9:22. I know that too. Then why am I being removed? Because the chief pilot under investigation is your wife. You were the stranded rescue subject, and you made the decision that grounded every company aircraft during a declared flood emergency. I couldn't argue with any of that. Hollis turned toward Sienna. And you are removed because you diverted Rescue 3 outside the released mission, transported a non-medical passenger without dispatch authorization, and edited the mission record after landing. Sienna's attorney had arrived before dawn. Mine hadn't. I didn't need one yet. Crosswind's aviation safety director, Janice Bell, would take operational control while an outside investigator reconstructed the flight. Until then, neither Sienna nor I could alter flight records, issue dispatch instructions, release aircraft, or contact crew members about the incident. I signed my acknowledgement. Sienna didn't. Her lawyer read it first. Hollis continued. The fleet can return to service once Janice and the outside investigator verify dispatch integrity and review last night's active assignments. Sienna finally spoke. How long? Hours. If everything checks out. Longer if it doesn't. We have flood rescues still active. State Aviation and Mutual Aid are carrying them. You're going to let another operator take our county missions because Reed overreacted? I looked at her. Hollis answered before I could. Your husband did not create the log edit. Sienna's jaw tightened. I corrected an inaccurate mission description. Janice opened a laptop. The original description said County Command Pickup. That was the mission. No. That was the diversion. Damon had to get to command. Janice remained calm. Then someone with county authority needed to request the diversion through dispatch. He was county logistics. He is a contracted advisor. He was coordinating resource allocation. That still does not make him aviation dispatch. Sienna leaned back. Fine. I should have called it improperly. Janice said, that is one issue. What's the other? You changed the record to weather avoidance after the flight. I changed the wording because the first entry made it sound personal. Janice looked at her for a long moment. Was it personal? Sienna said nothing. I said nothing. Sienna looked toward me anyway. The outside investigator arrived at 7 o'clock. His name was Malcolm Greer, a retired FAA operations inspector who now handled safety investigations for regional air medical and public service operators. He began with the mission file. Mission 3187 had been released at 6:58 p.m. Primary task, extract one stranded maintenance contractor from Pump Station 4. That contractor was me. Risk level, life safety 1. Flood forecast, structure potentially compromised within 30 minutes. Rescue 3 reached the pump station at 7:31. The aircraft hovered for 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Then it departed upriver. Malcolm displayed the track. Nobody spoke. The diversion to Riverbend Annex added 5.8 nautical miles each way. Rescue 3 landed there at 7:42. Damon boarded. The aircraft remained on the ground for 96 seconds. Then it flew toward County Command instead of returning directly to Pump 4. I looked at Sienna. You went to command first. She didn't answer. The flight track answered for her. Rescue 3 landed at the County Command pad at 7:49. Damon got off. The helicopter lifted again at 7:51. By then, Marta had already requested swiftwater rescue for me. Sienna had told me she needed 10 minutes. She'd actually used 20. Malcolm asked, Captain Holston, why did you land at command instead of returning immediately to Pump 4? Damon had physical materials that needed delivery. What materials? A portable communications drive and printed regional resource assignments. Could the drive have remained aboard while you returned to Pump 4? Sienna hesitated. Yes. Could Mr. Kersey? He wanted to brief command personally. That was not my question. Yes, he could have remained aboard. Malcolm wrote something down. Was there a medical reason he needed to disembark? No. Aviation safety reason? No. Was his briefing more urgent than the life safety extraction you had left? Sienna looked toward the table. At the time, I believed it was. There was the decision. Not a navigation mistake. not deteriorating weather. She had ranked Damon's usefulness above the rescue assignment. Malcolm asked for the county authorization. There wasn't one. Then he asked whether Damon had called Sienna directly before Rescue 3 reached me. Yes. How long before? 7 minutes. What did he say? Sienna's attorney shifted beside her. Sienna answered anyway. He said Riverbend's road access was gone and command needed him. Did he say he was physically endangered? No. Did you ask dispatch to verify? No. Why? Because I knew who he was. Malcolm looked up. What does that mean? I knew his role. I knew he wouldn't ask for an aircraft without a reason. That sentence told me more than any argument we'd had the night before. Damon didn't need formal authority because Sienna trusted his judgment enough to replace it. Malcolm moved to the crew. The rescue specialist, Jonah Pike, had filed a statement at 2 a.m. He wrote that he objected to leaving Pump 4. Not dramatically, one sentence over intercom. We have the subject in sight. Recommend complete this pickup first. Sienna overruled him. The co-pilot had also asked whether dispatch had approved the diversion. Sienna said she would notify them in flight. She never did. Sienna read both statements without speaking. I felt something inside me settle. Until then, part of me had wondered whether my presence on that roof made everything feel worse than it objectively was. It didn't. 2 crew members with no marital stake had questioned the same decision. Hollis asked Malcolm, "Can the other aircraft return to service?" From what I've seen so far, the event is isolated to Rescue 3 and dispatch authorization. I want a credential audit first. Janice provided it. Sienna's chief pilot login had modified 4 mission files over the previous 6 months. 3 were ordinary corrections: wrong landing zone name, incorrect fuel note, 1 weather code entered by a dispatcher and later corrected with supporting meteorological data. Mission 3187 was different. The audit showed the original diversion note created at 7:34. Then the change to weather avoidance at 8:06. No weather observation attached. No pilot report documenting unsafe conditions at Pump 4. No dispatch message authorizing the change. Malcolm looked at Hollis. You can return the unaffected aircraft to service once Janice restores dispatch controls under temporary dual authorization. Sienna turned toward me. So the fleet didn't need to be grounded. Malcolm answered instead. The fleet needed to be held until the integrity of operational control records was verified. She said nothing. At 9:18, 5 crosswind helicopters returned to available status. Rescue 3 remained grounded pending inspection and flight data preservation. My stand-on had lasted 10 hours and 27 minutes. The county had paid mutual aid operators during that period. Crosswind would almost certainly eat part of that cost. Then Hollis gave me the worst news. Belmere County has suspended our primary rescue contract pending review. Sienna stared at him. For how long? They haven't said. That contract is half our disaster response revenue. 43%. She looked at me. I knew what she was thinking. I had grounded the fleet. Now the county had grounded the company. Hollis turned toward me. Your operations leave remains in effect until the county and our insurer review the stand-on. I nodded. Sienna said, so Reed gets punished for doing exactly what he claims policy required? This is not punishment. Everyone keeps saying that while taking away our jobs. Hollis ignored her. The county wants to know whether the full fleet suspension was proportionate, whether mutual aid was fully established before the last aircraft landed, and whether Reed's personal involvement influenced the decision. That question was fair, too. My authority didn't become automatically correct because Sienna had been wrong. Malcolm asked me to explain why I had grounded aircraft not involved in her diversion. Because the chief pilot had administrative access to mission records and had altered one after landing. Why not suspend her credentials and keep flying? I did suspend her credentials. But then I didn't know whether other mission files had been altered. Whether dispatchers had been instructed to accept undocumented chief pilot changes, or whether any active flight was operating under an inaccurate release. Did you have evidence of another compromised mission? No. Then why not audit while flying? Because 5 aircraft were operating under the same dispatch system during a flood, and I could not verify the records were reliable until the credential history was checked. He wrote it down. How long did you expect the stand-on to last? Long enough to transfer active rescues and validate the system. Did you intend to cancel the county response for the night? No. Did you call mutual aid before or after initiating the standown? Before. No pending life safety missions were left uncovered. He nodded. That was all. At 10:05, Hollis dismissed us. Sienna followed me into the hallway. Read. I kept walking. She caught up near the elevator. You should have told me you were grounding everybody. You were airborne. You could have called me after I landed. I did. After the order. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. You knew what losing the county contract could do to Crosswind. Yes. And you did it anyway. I didn't suspend the contract. You created the event that gave them a reason. She turned toward me. You created the event when you left the assigned rescue for Damon. Yes. He was not some random passenger. That is the problem. Her face hardened. He has run disaster logistics for 15 years. Then he knows how dispatch works. He thought command had authorized it. Did he tell you that? She stopped. I watched the answer arrive before she spoke. He said they needed him. That is not authorization. No. Did he ever say somebody at county command told him to call you? Silence. Sienna? No. The elevator opened behind me. I didn't enter. Then he knew exactly what he was doing. Her anger shifted. What are you saying? I'm saying Damon wanted a helicopter. New dispatch might not give him one while life safety calls were open. And called the person he knew might bypass them. He wouldn't do that. He already did. She shook her head. You're making him the villain because you hate what happened. I don't need him to be the villain. That was true. Sienna had made the flight decision. But Damon's role now mattered for another reason. If he knowingly bypassed county dispatch to obtain a rescue aircraft during an emergency, the county contract review wouldn't be limited to Crosswind. It would reach him too. At 11:30, Belmere County's emergency director requested the complete Riverbend communications file. By noon, Damon had retained counsel. And at 12:18, County IT found the message he sent 7 minutes before Sienna reached my roof. Not to emergency command. To her personal phone. Road is gone. Command won't pull an aircraft off life safety queue for me. You know I need to be there. Come get me. Sienna read the screenshot in Hollis's office without moving. Damon had known dispatch would say no, so he went around it. Then my wife saw me standing on a roof in floodwater and gave him the helicopter anyway. Damon's message didn't excuse Sienna. It made her decision harder to defend. By noon, Belmere County knew he had deliberately bypassed emergency dispatch because he had already been told no aircraft would be diverted from the life safety queue for his transport. That changed his position from stranded logistics advisor to someone who understood the rules and chose a personal route around them. It didn't change who flew the helicopter away from me. Sienna did that. Crosswind's outside investigation continued through the afternoon. Malcolm Greer requested the complete communication history between Sienna and Damon for the 24 hours surrounding the flood, limited to messages relevant to county operations and aviation dispatch. Sienna's attorney objected to turning over her entire personal phone. The county narrowed the request: no family messages, no unrelated conversations, only communications involving emergency operations, flight requests, Riverbend Annex, mission assignments, or Crosswind aircraft. Sienna agreed. I learned that through Hollis because I remained on administrative leave. At 2:30, Janice Bell called me into a separate conference room. We found something in the scheduling history. What kind of something? Damon's name appears in 3 prior Crosswind diversions. My stomach tightened. Unauthorized? Not necessarily. She turned the monitor toward me. The first happened 4 months earlier during a wildfire evacuation. Rescue 5 had been assigned to shuttle county radio technicians between 2 temporary command posts. Damon requested that the aircraft pick him up at an alternate location after a road closure. Dispatch approved it. Nothing wrong there. The second involved tornado recovery 6 weeks later. Damon needed to reach a warehouse where relief supplies were being staged. Again, dispatch approved the change. The third was different. 2 months before the flood, Sienna moved Rescue 2 from a low-priority reconnaissance flight to pick Damon up from a rural emergency management site. The mission file showed an authorization number. Janice tapped it. The number does not belong to that incident. What does it belong to? A shelter supply request from the previous day. I looked at her. Who entered it? Sienna. Was the pickup otherwise requested by dispatch? No record. Did the flight displace a life safety mission? No. Reconnaissance only. That mattered. It wasn't another version of what happened to me. Nobody had been left in immediate danger. Still, Sienna had already used her chief pilot authority to create paperwork making a Damon pickup look formally authorized when the records didn't support it. Did she change the authorization number later? No. It was entered before departure. Could it be a typo? That's what Malcolm is determining. What does Sienna say? She says Damon told her county command had approved the pickup and gave her the number verbally. Did anyone verify it? No. I leaned back. That was the pattern beginning to appear. Damon didn't need Sienna to break rules dramatically every time. He simply needed her to trust him enough that his word replaced the process. Most of the time, nothing terrible happened. An aircraft took a different route. A passenger got where he needed to go. A mission still got completed. Every successful shortcut made the next one feel normal. Janice said, "There's also a dispatch note from that flight." She opened it. Marta had written, "Chief Pilot advised county authorization confirmed directly." Did Marta hear from the county? No. She relied on Sienna. Yes. That was how operational systems failed. Not because nobody had procedures. Because one trusted person became an unofficial substitute for them. I asked, "Does the county know about this?" Yes. What happens now? They're expanding the contract review. That was expected. I was more interested in Sienna. Did she know the authorization number was wrong? Malcolm hasn't concluded that. I nodded. Until somebody proved intent, I wasn't going to build it for them. At 4 o'clock, Sienna requested to speak with me. Hollis said neither company nor council prohibited it, but he recommended we meet in Crosswind's conference room with attorneys nearby if necessary. I agreed. She looked exhausted when she came in. Her flight suit was gone. She wore jeans and one of her old Crosswind sweatshirts, the kind she'd owned before becoming chief pilot. For a moment, I saw the woman I married rather than the pilot who flew away from me. Then she put a printed message on the table. "Road is gone. Command won't pull an aircraft off life safety queue for me. You know I need to be there. Come get me." I should have shown dispatch. Yes. I should have told him no. Yes. I knew what he meant when he said command wouldn't pull an aircraft. I waited. He had asked them. That was new. You knew he had already been refused. Yes. And you still diverted. Yes. Her eyes filled. Why? She looked at the message. Because I believed he was more useful at command than sitting at Riverbend. That was not your decision. I know. No, Sienna. You know now. What did you believe then? She was quiet for a long time. That I knew enough to judge the mission. There it was. Not love, not panic. Professional arrogance reinforced by personal trust. She had spent years flying disaster operations. Damon had spent years coordinating them. Somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing his requests as requests that required verification. They became information from someone whose judgment she trusted. What about the reconnaissance pickup 2 months ago? Her expression changed. You saw that? Yes. The authorization number was wrong. I know. Did Damon give it to you? Yes. Did you know it was wrong? No. Did you verify it? No. Why? Because he told me county command approved the pickup and that was enough. At the time. Yes. I thought about the flood. Did anything happen after that flight? No. Anyone complain? No. Contract issue? No. She shook her head. It was a 15-minute diversion on a reconnaissance mission. Exactly. Nothing happened. That was how the shortcut survived. Did Damon ask you for other flights without dispatch? A few times. How many? I don't know. More than 3? Yes. Did you always do it? No. What made you say yes? Whether I thought the request made operational sense. I looked at her. You decided whether the process was necessary based on whether you agreed with the outcome. Her face tightened. I was chief pilot. You were not county dispatch. I know. I let the silence sit. Then I asked the harder question. Was Damon asking you because he knew you would do things other pilots wouldn't? She looked away. Yes. How long have you known that? I didn't think of it that way. When did you start thinking of it that way? Today. That I believed. The flood hadn't created the relationship between them. It exposed what had been operating underneath it. Sienna didn't need to be sleeping with Damon. She didn't need to still love him romantically. Their intimacy was professional and historical. He knew how she thought. He knew what kind of operational argument would make her override hesitation. She knew his competence well enough that verification felt insulting. That was enough. Why didn't you tell me about those prior requests? Because they seemed routine. Did you tell Hollis? Not all of them. Janice? No. Dispatch? Only when I needed a flight change. I leaned back. So Damon had a private route into the fleet through you. She flinched. That sounds worse than it was. How should it sound? He didn't control aircraft. No. He controlled access to the person who could redirect them. Sienna looked down. That was the distinction she had been avoiding. At 5:10, Malcolm joined us briefly. He had finished the initial review of the prior reconnaissance pickup. The county authorization number was invalid for that flight. There was no evidence Sienna knew it was invalid when she entered it. Damon's phone records, however, showed he had never called county command that day before asking Sienna for pickup. He had lied to her about having approval. She had accepted it without checking. That deepened his responsibility. It didn't reduce hers. Malcolm said, Captain Holston, did you ever tell Mr. Kersey he could request aircraft directly through you? No. Did you ever tell him to stop? Sienna hesitated. No. How many times did he contact you directly about crosswind movements in the last year? I don't know. Estimate. 10. Maybe 12. Were all of those followed by normal dispatch requests? No. How many resulted in flight changes? Maybe 5. Any besides last night that displaced a life safety mission? No. That line mattered. The flood was the first time the pattern had crossed into immediate human danger. Malcolm closed his notebook. Then that is where I am drawing the line. He looked at Hollis, who had entered behind him. The prior events establish a breakdown in dispatch discipline involving the chief pilot and a recurring county advisor. Last night establishes the safety consequence. Hollis nodded. What does that mean for the fleet? The fleet is safe to operate under the temporary controls already in place. And the chief pilot? That is a company decision after the county review. Sienna didn't react. Hollis turned to me. Your operations leave continues. Understood. He hesitated. There's another issue. Of course there was. Not another safety event. A consequence of the one we already had. Belmere County wants Crosswind to explain how a chief pilot was able to edit mission classification and diversion reasons without secondary approval. Our software allowed it because chief pilots occasionally needed to correct records when dispatch was overloaded or when crews landed without complete notes. That authority existed for legitimate reasons. Now the county wanted dual verification for any post-flight change involving mission priority or diversion cause. Janice had already designed the temporary control. I said, implement it. Hollis looked at me. You're still on leave. I'm not issuing an order. I'm telling you I support it. He almost smiled. Fair. At 6:30, Belmere County held a briefing. They didn't cancel Crosswind's contract. They suspended new primary assignments for 48 hours while reviewing the incident. Mutual aid would remain lead responder during that period. Crosswind could accept support missions if requested and if Janice approved them. That was painful. It was also proportionate. No destroyed company. One contract. One review. One consequence large enough to matter. By 7 o'clock, the flood had begun receding in the western part of the county. Pump Station 4 was half gone. Fire crews sent me photographs. The section where I had been standing no longer existed. I stared at the images for a long time. Sienna came up beside me. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, I thought it would hold. I know. I've landed on worse structures. I know. I told myself you had a radio, mutual aid, and concrete under you. You also had me in sight. Her face broke. Yes. That was what no operational explanation could erase. I hadn't been an abstract risk marker on a screen. She saw me. The rotor wash was already touching my jacket. Her rescue specialist was ready. And she still turned upriver. Sienna whispered, "I'm sorry." I believe she was. Then Hollis's assistant opened the conference room door. "County investigators need Captain Holston again." Sienna nodded. Before leaving, she looked at me. "Are you going home?" "Not with you." She closed her eyes briefly. "Okay." She walked out. At 8:11, county investigators interviewed Damon. By 9 o'clock, they had his answer to the question that mattered. Why had he called Sienna after dispatch refused him an aircraft? Because, in his words, Sienna understood the operational value of getting me to command better than the Q did. He hadn't thought of himself as asking for a personal favor. He thought he had found a better decision-maker. And for months, Sienna had allowed him to believe that. The next morning, Malcolm Greer asked me to bring an old Crosswind operations manual to the conference room. Not the current one, the 2022 edition. I knew why as soon as I saw the tab on his desk, section 6.14, Field-Initiated Mission Adjustment. I had written most of it. Years earlier, Crosswind had nearly lost a wildfire crew because dispatch communications failed while smoke cut off a temporary command site. One of our pilots diverted without waiting for formal authorization, picked up 6 firefighters, and probably saved their lives. The county praised the decision. So did I. Afterward, I wrote a procedure allowing pilots to make limited mission adjustments when immediate field conditions made waiting for dispatch unreasonable. Malcolm pushed the manual toward me. "Explain what you intended." I read the paragraph even though I still remembered it. A pilot in command could alter routing, landing zone, or intermediate pickup when necessary for immediate safety, whether avoidance or preservation of the assigned mission. The pilot had to notify dispatch as soon as practicable. There was another sentence underneath. Field adjustment does not authorize reassignment from a higher priority life safety mission to a lower priority support function without operational control approval. Malcolm tapped it. "That language yours?" "Yes." "Why include it?" "Because pilots needed flexibility without becoming their own dispatchers." "Did Captain Holston know the rule?" "She helped review it." "Did Damon Kersey?" "I don't know." Malcolm turned to Sienna. She had been brought back into the meeting with her attorney. "Did you believe the Riverbend pickup qualified as a field adjustment?" "At the time, yes." "Under which part?" She didn't answer immediately. "Preservation of the assigned emergency response." "That is not what the rule says." "I know that now." Malcolm stayed patient. "What did you believe then?" Sienna looked at me before answering. "That getting Damon to command could improve the overall response enough to justify a temporary diversion." I understood the logic. I also understood why it was wrong. The rule was written for pilots reacting to conditions around the mission they already had: a blocked landing zone, a thunder cell, a sudden medical emergency, a crew member in danger. It was not written to let someone decide one person elsewhere had become more strategically useful than the person already waiting for rescue. Still, I felt something unpleasant as I reread the section. Crosswind had built a culture around judgment. Not recklessness, judgment. We hired pilots because we expected them to act when disaster plans broke down. We celebrated people who found a safe landing zone nobody had mapped or moved crews before a bureaucratic chain caught up. I had given speeches about it. During one company safety day, I told pilots, "When the plan and the real world separate, I expect you to fly the real world." Sienna had been sitting in the front row. Malcolm must have found that speech too, because he asked, "Do you think Crosswind rewarded improvisation?" "Yes." "Did you?" "Yes." Could that contribute to a senior pilot believing formal dispatch approval was optional when she thought she had a better operational answer? I hated the question because the honest answer was obvious. Yes. Sienna looked at me. Not triumphantly. Almost sadly. Malcolm continued. "Does that mean the diversion was permitted?" "No." "Why not?" "Because the same system ranks human risk precisely, so a pilot doesn't decide strategic value outranks immediate life safety." I pointed to the manual. She had me located. She had an open hoist position. Her crew recommended completing the pickup. Nothing prevented the assigned rescue. And the post-flight record change had no relationship to field discretion at all. Malcolm nodded. That was the distinction. Sienna hadn't invented the idea that experienced people should sometimes move faster than formal process. Crosswind had taught her that. I had helped teach her. What she did at Pump 4 was take a legitimate culture of field judgment one step beyond the boundary that made it safe. Then she changed the record after the result became impossible to defend. The county review reached the same issue from another direction. For years, Belmere emergency managers had treated Damon as a problem solver. He didn't hold command authority, but he knew every staging warehouse, fuel contractor, bridge restriction, hospital backup site, and mutual aid agreement in the region. During storms and fires, people called him directly because he could often solve logistics problems faster than the official coordination desk. The county had tolerated that. Sometimes encouraged it. I saw old messages where emergency managers told Crosswind Dispatch, if Damon needs movement between logistics sites, prioritize if assets allow. That phrase mattered. If assets allow. It explained why Sienna had become accustomed to his direct requests. It also explained why Damon believed calling her was normal. In earlier incidents, the shortcuts usually ended with the same result formal dispatch would have approved anyway. Nobody got hurt. Nobody complained. Sienna sat across from me while Malcolm summarized the history. I wasn't the only person taking his calls. No. Dispatch moved him before. Yes. You approved some of those flights. Yes. Her eyes held mine. Then you understand why it didn't feel like I was stealing an aircraft. I understand why calling Damon back didn't feel wrong. She waited. I do not understand leaving Pump 4 after you were already in hover. Her face tightened. That's where it changed. Yes. She looked down. I had spent the first 2 days thinking Damon had some unique hold over my wife because he was her ex. The truth was more complicated. Their marriage gave him personal access. Their years of disaster work gave him professional credibility. Crosswind's culture gave Sienna room to improvise. The county's own habits had taught Damon that bypassing formal channels often worked. All of that brought them to the moment over Pump 4. None of it forced Sienna to turn the helicopter away. Malcolm asked me one more question. If the stranded person on that roof had been anyone except you, would you have grounded the fleet? Yes. Sienna looked up. How can you know that? Because the fleet stand-on was about the altered mission record. But you only discovered the edit because it happened to you. That's true. Malcolm leaned forward. That distinction is important. I looked at him. He explained. My personal involvement had made the failure visible faster. It didn't automatically make the operational response improper. But Crosswind needed to determine whether the same record manipulation would have triggered the same response if the abandoned rescue subject had been a stranger. Hollis asked, how do we determine that? Malcolm looked at Janice. Past precedent. Crosswind has one. 3 years earlier, a dispatcher accidentally altered the priority on 2 medical transport missions during a software migration. Nobody was injured. But operations stopped launches for 90 minutes while the company verified every active release. I had ordered that stand-on too. The county representative reviewing our contract asked for the file. By afternoon, they had it. That didn't erase the cost of grounding the fleet during a flood. It did establish that I had treated compromised mission control data as a fleet-level problem before my marriage was involved. At 3:40, Belmere County restored Crosswind as a secondary rescue provider. Primary status remained suspended while the review continued, but our helicopters could again accept assignments through county dispatch. Hollis called the decision the beginning of a way back. Sienna remained on leave. So did I. The larger company would survive. What happened next depended less on the fleet and more on whether Crosswind could trust its chief pilot again. At 5 o'clock, Malcolm asked Sienna to explain the record change one final time. He didn't replay the logs. Everyone already knew what they showed. Why did you replace county command pickup with temporary weather diversion? Sienna stared at the table. Because after I landed at command, I knew I had broken mission priority. Did weather force you away from Pump 4? No. Was weather a contributing factor? Conditions were bad everywhere. But no. Then why use that code? She took a long breath. Because a weather diversion could be justified within pilot authority. The room went still. Malcolm asked, "Were you trying to make the flight look authorized after the fact?" "Yes." That was the first time she had said it without wrapping the answer in record-keeping language. Her attorney shifted but let her continue. "I knew Reed would challenge the diversion. I knew Marta had the original note. I thought if the mission history showed weather avoidance, the flight would look like a pilot-in-command decision instead of an unauthorized reassignment." Hollis asked, "Were you trying to protect Damon?" Sienna thought about it. "Partly. And yourself?" "Yes." That completed the responsibility question for me. Damon had deliberately bypassed dispatch. Sienna trusted him because years of successful improvisation had taught her that his judgment was usually worth acting on. I had helped build a company culture that prized field initiative. But once she saw me on that roof, knew my mission priority, heard her own crew recommend completing the rescue, and still turned toward Riverbend, the decision belonged to her. The edit afterward belonged to her too. There was no larger explanation waiting to take those choices away. Malcolm closed his file. "I have enough on the operational event." Sienna looked at him. "What does that mean?" "My report will recommend corrective changes to Crosswind's dispatch authority and mission edit controls. Personnel decisions belong to the company." Hollis gave no indication what he intended to do. The meeting ended. Sienna caught me in the airport lobby. "Reed." I stopped. "I heard what you said in there about the culture." I waited. "You admitted you helped build it." "Yes." She looked almost relieved. Then I said, "That doesn't split Pump 4 50-50 between us." The relief disappeared. "I know. I should have built stronger controls around mission edits. I should have questioned how often Damon bypassed dispatch. Crosswind should have stopped treating successful shortcuts like proof that the shortcut was safe." She nodded. "But I did not turn Rescue 3 away from that roof." "No. You did." "Yes." We stood there with airport windows behind her and 5 Crosswind helicopters visible on the distant ramp. Then Sienna said, "I don't know how to live with seeing you down there and knowing I still left." For the first time, I didn't answer with anger. "You'll have to." Her eyes filled. "So will I." I walked away. That evening, Belmere County delivered its preliminary contract finding. Crosswind's system had allowed too much senior-level editing without secondary verification, and the county itself had tolerated informal direct access between Damon and rescue personnel. Both would change. The county also concluded that neither weakness authorized Sienna's diversion from Pump 4. Crosswind could fix the system. Belmere could fix its dispatch discipline. Neither could. Change the moment Rescue 3 was already hovering above me and its pilot decided someone else mattered more. Belmere County restored Crosswind's primary rescue status on Friday morning. The decision came with conditions. Every mission priority change now required a second operations approval. Any post-flight edit involving diversion reason, passenger status, or emergency classification generated an automatic audit notice. County advisors could no longer request aircraft directly from pilots except in an immediate threat to life when dispatch was unreachable. The rules were simple because the failure had become simple. Too many people had been allowed to substitute trust for verification. Crosswind accepted every condition. The county also removed Damon from aviation coordination for the remainder of his consulting contract. He wasn't fired from disaster logistics. He was barred from requesting, assigning, or informally arranging aircraft movement. That consequence fit what he had done. He knowingly bypassed dispatch after being denied a helicopter and used his personal access to Sienna instead. The county didn't pretend he had flown the aircraft. Neither did I. At 10:30, Hollis called me into his office. Janice Bell was already there. Malcolm Greer's completed report sat between them. Hollis pointed to the chair. "The board is lifting your administrative leave." I sat. "Effective immediately." The stand-on was found proportionate under the circumstances. I expected relief. What I felt instead was exhaustion. Janice pushed a page toward me. "The prior software migration stand-on helped. So did the fact that you transferred active life safety calls before grounding the last aircraft." "County agrees?" "Yes." "Any finding that I acted because Sienna was my wife?" Malcolm's report addressed that directly. "My personal involvement created an obvious conflict and should have triggered faster transfer of authority to safety once immediate stabilization was complete. But the initial stand-on itself was supported by compromised mission control data and prior company practice. In other words, grounding the fleet was justified. Continuing to control the investigation personally would not have been. I hadn't. Hollis said, "There will be one corrective action for you." What? We're changing the emergency authority matrix. If a director or chief pilot is personally involved in the triggering event, the safety director takes over once immediate life safety actions are complete. That should already have existed. I agree. I signed the revised policy acknowledgement. Then I asked the only question left. What happens to Sienna? Hollis didn't answer immediately. The board meets at 1 o'clock to decide whether she's fired. Or whether she remains chief pilot. That wasn't the same thing. I looked at him. They're considering keeping her? Janice answered. Malcolm found no pattern of unsafe flying, no falsified maintenance records. No drug or alcohol issue, no prior life safety diversion, and no evidence she knowingly used a false authorization number on the earlier reconnaissance pickup. She falsified this mission record. Yes. And abandoned a life safety 1 assignment. Yes. Janice didn't soften it. But the board has to decide what consequence protects the operation, not what consequence feels satisfying. That was fair. I hated that it was fair. What are the options? Hollis counted them off. Termination. Resignation in lieu of termination. Or removal as chief pilot, a long suspension from rescue command, remedial training, and eventual return as a line pilot under direct supervision. She could keep flying. Possibly. I pictured Sienna in a cockpit again. My first reaction was immediate. No. Then I forced myself to separate husband from operations director. Was she incapable of flying safely? No. Had she spent years doing exactly that? Yes. Was the problem her stick and rudder skill? No. It was judgment, authority, and dishonesty after the fact. Those were severe. They were also different from being technically unfit to operate an aircraft. Hollis watched me. You don't get a vote. I know. I'm telling you because you will be in the same company if she stays. I understand. If that is impossible personally, tell me now. I thought about it. I can do my job. That wasn't the question. It's the answer I have. At 1 o'clock, the board met without me. Sienna arrived with her attorney 15 minutes early. We crossed paths outside the conference room. She stopped. Your leave was lifted. Yes. I heard the county restored the contract. Yes. That's good. It is. She looked toward the closed boardroom doors. They're giving me an option. I knew Hollis hadn't told me the final terms yet. What option? Resign as chief pilot. 6-month suspension from flight duty. Then I can apply to return as a line pilot if I complete the safety program and the board approves. I studied her. You're considering it? Yes. Why wouldn't you? She gave me a tired look. Because I don't know whether I should ever fly rescue again. That answer surprised me more than if she had defended herself. You've flown hundreds of missions. I left one. Yes. That one is enough to make me question everything I thought I knew about my judgment. Questioning it is probably necessary. Do you think I should take the deal? No. Her face changed. I continued before she misunderstood. I think you should stop asking me to decide what you deserve. She looked down. You're right. If you take it because I tell you to, then 6 months from now, you can blame me for putting you back in a cockpit. I wouldn't. You don't know that. She didn't argue. And if I tell you to quit, I said, then I become the person deciding your career because of what happened to our marriage. It happened on a crosswind mission. It happened in both places. She looked through the window toward the ramp. Rescue 3 still sat inside a maintenance hangar. The aircraft itself had passed inspection. It remained out of service only because investigators had preserved certain onboard data until the report closed. Sienna said, I used to think the hardest calls were the ones where every option was bad. They usually are. This one wasn't. I waited. You were right there. Her voice dropped. Jonah was ready. We had the hoist. I had the fuel. The aircraft was stable. There wasn't a technical problem to solve. No. I created one because Damon made his request sound bigger than the person in front of me. That was as close as she had come to naming what happened without hiding inside procedure. He knew how to talk to you. Yes. He knew what you valued. Yes. That still wasn't control. No. She looked at me. I know. The board secretary opened the door. Captain Holston. Sienna took one step, then turned back. Reed. Yes. I'm sorry you had to hear me tell investigators I thought his briefing mattered more. I said nothing. She swallowed. I'm more sorry that it was true. Then she went inside. The meeting lasted 2 hours. I spent most of it reviewing the operational changes with Marta and Janice. The flood had receded enough that Crosswind was shifting from rooftop rescue to medical transport, supply movement, and infrastructure inspection. 5 aircraft were active. The same fleet I had grounded 4 nights earlier was flying again under tighter controls. At 3:18, Hollis called me upstairs. Sienna was gone. He handed me the board decision. She had accepted permanent removal as chief pilot. Her company management credentials were revoked immediately. She would serve a 6-month unpaid suspension. Before any return to flight duty, she would have to complete an external aeronautical decision-making program, undergo simulator evaluation, and receive approval from both safety and an independent check pilot. If she returned, it would be as a line captain with no dispatch override authority for at least 2 years. Did the board offer this? I asked. Or did she? The structure was ours. She accepted. Yes. No fight. She asked for one change. What? Hollis pointed to the second page. The original proposal would have allowed Sienna to retain the title of chief pilot during suspension while another captain served in an acting role. She refused. She said if the authority was the part she misused, keeping the title while someone else carried the responsibility was cosmetic. That sounded like her. Or at least like the version of her I had married before political titles. Command authority and Damon's certainty began mixing together. She resigned the title herself? Yes. Effective today? Yes. Hollis closed the file. She also waived any challenge to the board finding. That cost her. Chief pilot had been the job she spent 8 years working toward. She had beaten out candidates with military backgrounds, offshore time, and more total flight hours because she understood rescue operations better than anyone Crosswind had. Now her name was already gone from the operations roster. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I remembered the first time she got the promotion. She came home after midnight, still in uniform, opened a bottle of cheap champagne, and sat on the kitchen floor because we hadn't owned enough furniture yet. She had cried then too, for a completely different reason. At 4 o'clock, Damon's attorney released a statement. He accepted the county's restriction on his aviation role and acknowledged that contacting Sienna after dispatch refused transport was improper. He denied intending to place anyone in danger. I believe that part. Damon didn't call Sienna hoping I would drown. He thought getting himself to command mattered enough to justify bending the queue. Sienna agreed. That was all the disaster needed. I didn't need him arrested. I didn't need his career destroyed. I needed the shortcut closed. It was by late afternoon. The operational side of the event had narrowed to almost nothing. The county contract was restored. The dispatch system was corrected. Damon lost direct aviation access. Sienna lost the chief pilot authority she had misused. I returned to operations. Crosswind kept flying. At 6:12, I finally went home. Sienna's car was in the driveway. She was sitting on the front steps. I stopped several feet away. You could have gone inside. I wasn't sure I should. It's still your house for now. That phrase told me what conversation she expected. I unlocked the door. She didn't move. I accepted the board decision. I know. Hollis told you. Yes. I'm not going to appeal. Okay. She looked up. Does that change anything for us? There it was. Her first real attempt to connect professional accountability to our marriage. I sat on the other end of the step. No. She closed her eyes. I continued. I'm glad you accepted responsibility. But it doesn't put the helicopter back over the roof. Her mouth trembled. I know. And losing the chief pilot title isn't something you pay me. I know. It belongs to Crosswind. Yes. I looked at the wet lawn. We still have to decide what belongs to us. Sienna was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, Do you still love me? That was harder than every aviation question I had answered all week. Yes. She started crying. I didn't reach for her because love wasn't the disputed fact. Trust was. And 4 nights earlier, while a rescue helicopter hovered close enough for me to see my wife through the windshield, she had looked directly at me and decided she could come back later. Sienna moved into the guest room that night. Neither of us called it a separation. We didn't need the word yet. At 5:40 the next morning, I woke to the sound of her coffee grinder and almost forgot what had happened. For 7 years, that sound meant she had an early launch. I would come downstairs. She would complain about weather forecasts written by people who never sat in a cockpit, and I would tell her to stop stealing my travel mug. That morning, there was no flight suit hanging over the kitchen chair. Sienna wore sweatpants and an old Academy sweatshirt. Her company badge sat on the counter. She had already removed the chief pilot insignia from it. I made coffee, she said. I can see that. I didn't know whether you wanted any. I do. She poured it. We stood 6 feet apart in our own kitchen. For the first time since the flood, there were no investigators waiting for either of us. No company lawyers. No dispatch logs. No county review. Just us. That made the silence worse. Sienna finally said, I'm going to my sister's place for a few days. Okay. I think we need space. Yes. She stared into her cup. I hate how easily you said that. I hate that it's true. She nodded. Then she went upstairs to pack. I drove to Crosswind before she left. 5 helicopters were already active. The 6th Rescue 3 had been released from data preservation and would return to service after a scheduled inspection. The aircraft had done nothing wrong. That bothered me in a strange way. Machines were easier. Inspect them, find the defect, replace the part, test the system, return to service. People didn't come with maintenance manuals. At 8 o'clock, I met Jonah Pike in the crew room. He was the rescue specialist who had been in Rescue 3 when Sienna left me. We had avoided each other since the investigation began. Not intentionally. There had simply never been a good moment. He closed the locker in front of him. How are you doing? Better. I heard Pump 4 is being demolished. What's left of it? He nodded. Then I said, I read your statement. His expression tightened. You okay with that? You told the truth. I told them I recommended picking you up. I know. I should have pushed harder. No. He looked at me. Sienna was pilot in command. Yes. I could have challenged again. You did challenge once. What would a second time have changed? I don't know. Then don't invent responsibility because you were sitting behind hers. He rubbed a hand over his face. She was the chief pilot. That mattered. Not because her rank made disagreement impossible, but because it made disagreement expensive. Jonah had less than 3 years at Crosswind. Sienna had nearly 9. She evaluated rescue crews. She recommended promotions. When she made a judgment call in bad weather, junior people had learned that she was usually right. Did you feel like you could tell her no? I asked. Jonah took time before answering. Normally? Yes. About equipment or something unsafe? Absolutely. And that night I thought the diversion was wrong. I didn't think it was unsafe for the aircraft. That isn't the same thing. No. He leaned against the locker. She said Damon was essential at command. I knew who he was. Everybody did. So when she overruled you, I figured she knew something I didn't. That sentence stayed with me. It was the same mechanism again. Damon trusted Sienna over dispatch. Sienna trusted Damon over the queue. Jonah trusted Sienna over his own concern. Everyone was relying on someone else's confidence. The actual mission information had been the least trusted thing in the chain. Pump 4. Life Safety 1. Subject located. Immediate extraction available. Nothing in that description required interpretation. Yet interpretation beat it. I thanked Jonah. For what? For speaking up. Didn't work. It matters that you did. At 10 o'clock, Janice asked me into her office. She had another revision to Crosswind's procedures. Not because the county required it, but because Jonah's interview had exposed a weakness we hadn't addressed. Any crew member could now call a formal mission challenge when a pilot proposed abandoning or materially delaying a life safety assignment for a lower priority task. The pilot could still override in an immediate aircraft safety emergency. Otherwise, dispatch had to review the conflict before the mission changed. I read it. This is good. Janice nodded. Sienna suggested it. I looked up. When? Last night? She's suspended. She sent it as a safety recommendation, not an instruction. Janice handed me the email. It was short. Sienna wrote that Jonah had done exactly what Crosswind trained him to do. But the system gave his objection no formal weight once a senior pilot declared an operational reason for diversion. She recommended a process that forced a second set of eyes onto any life safety downgrade. At the bottom, she had written, "Do not name this after the incident or after me. It needs to function as ordinary procedure, not punishment." I handed the page back. You implementing it? Yes. Good. Janice watched me. That's all you have to say? What else? She's trying. I know. You're allowed to know that without forgiving her. I know that too. People kept telling me what I was allowed to feel. The problem was I felt all of it. Anger. Love. Relief that she survived the professional consequences. Resentment that part of me still wanted to protect her from them. I could look at her safety recommendation and recognize the pilot I respected. Then I could close my eyes and see Rescue 3 banking upriver. Both were true. At lunch, Hollis called me upstairs. He had a personal question disguised badly as an administrative one. If Sienna returns after 6 months, can you supervise operations involving her? Yes. Without treating her differently? Yes. Can she report through your department? I hesitated. That was different. Crosswind's structure put flight operations and pilot management close enough that my authority could affect scheduling, mission release, performance review, and disciplinary referrals. Even if both of us behaved perfectly, everybody else would know what happened between us. No. I said. Hollis nodded. I agree. What are you proposing? If she returns, her operational supervision moves entirely to Janice for the first year. You do not approve her missions, evaluations, or corrective actions. That works. You're okay with that? It should be that way whether we stay married or not. He studied me. So, you don't know? No. Hollis didn't ask more. That afternoon, Sienna texted me. Can we talk tonight before I go to Marbles? I agreed. She arrived home before me. 2 bags sat by the front door. Dinner sat untouched on the table. I didn't cook, she said. I ordered. That was probably safer. She almost smiled. We sat across from each other. Neither of us ate much. Sienna spoke first. I talked to Damon. That tightened something in my chest. Why? To tell him not to contact me again. I waited. Not forever. I told him I can't be his unofficial route into anything I do professionally. That seems late. It is. What did he say? He apologized. For what? For calling me when dispatch said no. That's all. He said he never expected me to leave you there. I laughed once. Of course he didn't. Sienna's face tightened. He thought I would pick you up first. That was new. But it changed almost nothing. Did he tell you that on the call? No. So, you made the choice he didn't even ask you to make? Yes. She looked down. I think that's the part one hate most. I didn't understand. She explained. For days I told myself Damon manipulated me. Then I told myself Crosswind's culture trained me to improvise. Then I told myself county logistics had always treated him like an exception. All of those mattered. Yes. But none of them told me to leave you. I stayed quiet. I did that because I wanted to prove I could see the whole disaster better than the Q could. Her eyes lifted to mine. I thought getting Damon to command was the smarter move. And I trusted that judgment so much I was willing to make you wait. That was the cleanest explanation I had heard from her. Not because I was her husband. Not because Damon was her ex. Those facts intensified it. But the failure underneath them was simpler. She believed her judgment deserved to outrank a rule designed for exactly the moment when judgment became distorted. Sienna said, I don't know whether losing the chief pilot job is enough. That isn't my decision. I know. You keep coming back to punishment because I want there to be something I can do. There may not be. Her mouth trembled. I hate that answer. So do I. She looked toward the bags. I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. Good. I just need you to know I'm not going to use the suspension to wait you out. What does that mean? I'm not going to spend 6 months being perfect and then show up expecting the marriage back because I completed a checklist. That was the first thing she had said about us that made me feel less cornered. What are you going to do? I don't know. About flying. The board gave me a path back. For most of my adult life, flying had been the one thing she never questioned. Now she did. I enrolled in the safety program that was required. I know. I'm also doing a crew resource course the board didn't require. Why? Because Jonah told investigators he assumed I knew something he didn't. I had heard the same thing that morning. That bothered you. It scared me. Sienna pressed her hands together. I spent years becoming the person crews trusted in bad situations. I never thought that trust could make someone stop challenging me. It can happen to anyone with authority. I know. That's why systems matter. She gave a sad smile. You sound like yourself again. I was always myself. No. On the roof, you sounded like somebody trying not to die. The room went still. That was the first time either of us had said it that plainly. I looked at her. I thought I might. Sienna's eyes filled immediately. I know. No. You know the building collapsed. That's different. She didn't interrupt. When the helicopter turned away, I didn't know whether another one was coming. I didn't know the boat was 17 minutes out. I didn't know whether the next piece of debris would take the wall. My throat tightened. I knew my wife had looked at me and left. Sienna covered her mouth. I continued because if I stopped, I might never say it. That is the part one don't know how to repair. Tears ran down her face. I don't either. I can understand everything else now. Damon. Dispatch. The company culture. Your judgment. The record edit. I looked at her. But if I'm trapped somewhere again and you tell me you're coming, I don't know if my body will believe you. Sienna closed her eyes for several seconds. Neither of us moved. Then she stood. Not toward me, toward the luggage. I should go. I nodded. At the door, she turned back. I love you. I know. I'm not asking you to say it. I love you too. That hurt her more. She started crying again because she finally understood that love was not the thing keeping us apart. She picked up her bags. Before leaving, she placed her house key on the table. You don't have to do that. I know. Then why? Because I don't want to use having a key as permission to keep coming back whenever I can't stand the distance. That was a real cost. No cameras. No board. No career consequence. Just a woman choosing not to force access to something she wanted. I left the key where she put it. Sienna walked out. Her car disappeared at the end of the street. The next morning, Rescue 3 returned to service. A different captain flew it. I stood behind the operations glass as the helicopter lifted into a clear blue sky, crossed the runway, and turned south. For the first time since the flood, seeing it airborne didn't make my hands shake. But when it disappeared beyond the hangars, I still remembered the night it turned the other direction. 3 weeks after the flood, Sienna returned to Crosswind for the first time. Not to fly. Not to argue her suspension. She came to speak at the company safety review. Malcolm Greer had recommended that Crosswind brief every pilot, dispatcher, rescue specialist, and operations manager on the Pump 4 incident before the investigation formally closed. Normally, a safety presentation would anonymize the crew. Aircraft A, Pilot 1. Stranded subject. Sienna refused. When Janice told me that morning, I thought I had misunderstood. She wants her name used? Yes. Why? She says everybody here already knows who flew Rescue 3. Pretending otherwise turns the meeting into theater. What about the cockpit audio? She authorized that too. That made me stop. The cockpit voice recording wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming. No confession. That was what made it worse. Jonah recommending that they complete the rescue. The co-pilot asking whether dispatch approved the diversion. Sienna saying she had it. Then the helicopter turning away. Her voice remained calm through all of it. Professional. Certain. If Crosswind used that recording in training, the people who had once looked To Sienna, as the best judgment in the company, would hear exactly how ordinary a disastrous decision could sound while it was being made. She doesn't have to do that, I said. I told her. What did she say? Janice looked at me. She said that was why she should. The briefing began at 9 o'clock. I sat in the back. Sienna walked into the training room alone. No uniform. No captain's bars. No company badge. Almost 60 employees were there. Some had flown with her for years. Others had been hired under her. Jonah sat in the second row. Sienna stood beside the screen while Malcolm displayed the mission timeline. He didn't spend an hour retelling the flood. Everybody knew the sequence. Instead, he focused on 5 minutes. 7:29 Damon's message. 7:31 Pump 4 located. 7:32 Crew recommendation to extract. 7:33 Sienna's decision to divert. 7:34 Mission note changed without dispatch authorization. That was enough. Then Malcolm played the cockpit audio. Jonah's voice came first. Subject in sight. Recommend we finish this pickup. Sienna. Negative. Temporary diversion. Riverbend first. Co-pilot. Dispatch approve? Sienna. I'll advise. Jonah. Pump 4 is life safety 1. Sienna. I know. This will be quick. No shouting. No panic. Just certainty. Malcolm stopped the audio. Then he asked Sienna one question. At what point did you know enough to make the correct decision? She looked at the screen. When we saw Pump 4. Why? Because the assigned subject was located, accessible, and exposed to an immediate threat. Riverbend was not. Did you need more information? No. Did Damon's role change the mission priority? No. Did your belief that he was important to command change it? No. Malcolm stepped aside. Sienna faced the room. I told myself it did. Nobody moved. I had flown enough disasters that I was used to plans becoming outdated. That experience saved people before. It also taught me to trust my own judgment when the system felt slow. She looked toward Jonah. Then somebody I trusted told me the system was making the wrong choice. Jonah kept his eyes on her. I believed him. She didn't say Damon manipulated her. She didn't mention that he was her ex. 4 months, direct requests from him had ended well enough that I stopped treating the missing dispatch step as a warning. Then she looked toward the back of the room at me. On the night of the flood, I had every fact I needed. The crew challenged me. The mission classification was clear. The person assigned for rescue was physically in front of us. Her voice tightened. I overrode all of it. The room stayed silent. She continued. The record edit afterward was not confusion. It was not bad software. I knew a weather diversion fit pilot authority better than what I had actually done. And I changed the entry because I wanted the flight to look defensible. That was the sentence she had authorized Crosswind to preserve in the safety record. Not forever on the internet, but permanently inside the company that had once promoted her. Malcolm asked whether anyone had questions. A young pilot near the aisle raised his hand. If the person on Pump 4 hadn't been Reed, do you think you would have made the same diversion? I expected Sienna to say yes. It would have made the failure cleaner. She didn't. I don't know. The pilot looked surprised. Sienna continued. My marriage affected the decision too. My chest tightened. How? Malcolm asked. She didn't look at me this time. Reed and I had been fighting about Damon for months. That was true. Not about an affair. About access. Calls during dinner. Weekend planning interrupted because Damon needed Sienna's opinion. The way she defended him whenever I said he treated her like an extension of county logistics. Sienna said, when Reed challenged me over the radio, part of me heard my husband accusing me of choosing Damon again. The room became even quieter. And instead of letting that make me more careful, I became defensive. There it was, one final piece. Not a new secret. The subjective intent already hiding inside the recorded argument. I wanted to prove I was making an operational decision, not a personal one. Her hands tightened around the podium. So I committed harder to the decision after I should have reversed it. I remembered my words from the roof. You are leaving your husband on a flooding roof to fly your ex out of a dry emergency building. And hers. Do not use your position to make this personal. I had thought that line was hypocrisy. Now I understood another part of it. She had been saying it to herself too. If she turned around immediately after I accused her of choosing Damon, she would have had to admit, at least to herself, that Damon's identity had affected the decision. So she kept flying. Not because she wanted me hurt, but because admitting she had become personally compromised felt harder in that moment than continuing the mistake. Malcolm asked, "Is that why you later changed the record?" "Partly." "Explain." Sienna looked at the timeline. By the time I landed at command, I knew how the diversion would look. Because Reed was your husband? Yes. And Damon was your ex-husband? Yes. So you changed the record to make the basis appear technical? Yes. That was the final truth. Not an affair. Not a conspiracy. Not Damon controlling her. Sienna had become so determined to prove that her professional judgment was independent of the two men in her personal life that she hid the fact that both relationships were already distorting it. Malcolm ended the session soon after. Employees filed out quietly. Jonah stopped beside Sienna. I couldn't hear everything he said, only her answer. "You did your job. I should have listened." He nodded once and left. I remained in the back row. Eventually, the room emptied. Sienna walked toward me. "Did Janice tell you I volunteered the audio?" "Yes. I wasn't trying to make a gesture." "I know. I just don't want another captain hearing themselves sound that calm one day and assuming calm means they're right." That was probably the most pilot-like thing she had said since losing the cockpit. "How's the course?" I asked. "Hard." "Good." She almost smiled. "I deserve that." That wasn't an insult. "I know." We walked outside. Crosswind helicopters moved across the ramp in the distance. She watched them. "Do you miss it?" "Every hour." "Still think you might go back?" "Yes." That surprised me slightly. Not because she lacked the right, but because 3 weeks earlier she could barely imagine sitting in a cockpit again. "What changed?" "I stopped treating never flying again as proof that I understand what I did." I looked at her. She continued. "Quitting would be easier in some ways. I could make the Flood the last flight of my career and tell myself I paid enough. But going back means I have to learn how to fly without needing to be the smartest person in every decision. That sounds harder." Which was probably why I respected it. She said, "If safety clears me in 6 months, I'm going to apply." "Okay. You don't have to like it." "I do." Her eyes widened. "I still think you're one of the best pilots I've ever worked with." That hurt both of us. "Reed, being good at something isn't the same as being incapable of failing at it." "No. And being wrong once doesn't mean you should never touch an aircraft again." Tears gathered in her eyes. "That sounds almost like forgiveness." "It isn't." She nodded. "I know." There was the marriage again, waiting between every other subject. I had spent 3 weeks thinking about what would happen when her suspension ended. Whether seeing her complete the courses would matter. Whether watching her return under supervision would make the memory smaller. Whether 6 months apart would make me trust her again. The answer had finally become clear. "I talked to a divorce attorney yesterday." Sienna closed her eyes. The ramp noise seemed louder. When she opened them, she didn't ask me to reconsider. "How soon?" "We can file jointly if we agree on the property." "We will." "We don't have to decide everything today." "Yes, we do." I looked at her. She wiped one tear away. "Not the property." "This, Sienna." "No." Her voice remained steady. "I told you I wasn't going to use 6 months of suspension as a countdown until you took me back." "I remember." "If you've decided, I'm not asking you to spend 6 months proving it again." That was the second time she chose not to use access just because she still had it. "First the house key. Now time." I said, "I still love you." "I know you understand that." "Yes." "Then why are you making this easy?" She gave me the saddest smile I had ever seen. "I'm not." Then she stepped closer. "Not touching me. I'm making it final." I looked at her. She said, "Send me the papers when your attorney has them." I wanted to tell her there was no urgency. Part of me wanted her to fight not because I would change my mind, but because being fought for would hurt less than being understood. Sienna seemed to know that. She didn't give me the easier pain. You should go back inside, she said. You have operations. And I have class. She walked toward her car. Halfway there, she turned around. Read. Yes. When Rescue 3 comes up on your board, don't avoid assigning it because of me. It's an aircraft. I know. So do I. She nodded. Then she left. At 1:16 that afternoon, Rescue 3 launched on a routine flood recovery supply mission. Different pilot. Normal dispatch. Dual authorization. No shortcuts. I watched its status move from green to airborne on the operations screen. For the first time, I didn't see the helicopter that left me. I saw a machine doing exactly what the system told it to do. Sienna and I filed for divorce the following week. She didn't ask me to wait until her suspension ended, and I didn't ask her to stop flying so I could feel safer. We had spent too long confusing love with permission to decide for each other. This time, neither of us did. The divorce was final before Sienna's suspension ended. We didn't fight over the house. I bought out her share because I was staying in Belmere. And she wasn't sure where she wanted to live once she returned to flying. She kept her retirement account. I kept mine. There were no children, no complicated trusts, no business ownership to divide. Our attorneys needed more pages than either of us thought necessary to say that two people who had once planned to grow old together would leave with what was reasonably theirs. The judge signed the decree on a gray October morning. Sienna and I walked out of the courthouse together. For a few seconds, neither of us moved toward our cars. Her hair was shorter. She had started cutting it during the safety program because, according to her, 6-hour simulator sessions made long hair irritating under a headset. That sounded like Sienna. Practical even when her life was coming apart. How did your evaluation go? I asked. She looked surprised. Janice told you? She told me you completed it. Not the result. I passed. Good. Independent check ride is Friday. I nodded. If I pass that, I can apply to return as a line captain. Yes. No management credentials. No. She looked down at the courthouse steps. I'm nervous. You should be. She laughed softly. You always know exactly what to say. You used to like that. I still do. That landed between us. Not an invitation. Just another true thing we could no longer use. Sienna looked toward my truck. House. Crosswind? Busy. County contract stable. New mission challenge procedure used twice. Her eyebrows rose. For real conflicts? One weather downgrade. One medical priority dispute. Work. Yes. She smiled. That mattered to her. Probably always would. I realized then that part of what I had loved about Sienna was still standing in front of me. The pilot who cared whether a procedure worked. The woman who could spend an hour arguing about rescue hoist limits and somehow make it interesting. Divorce hadn't transformed her into somebody I hated. It had only made love insufficient. She said, Damon sent me an email last month. I didn't react much. What did he want? To apologize again. Did you answer? No. Because of me? No. That answer came immediately. Because I finally understood that whether I forgive him has nothing to do with whether he should have direct access to my professional judgment. I nodded. He's still working. County renewed his logistics contract in a reduced role. No aviation coordination. That was enough consequence for him. He had lost the shortcut he abused. He didn't need to become the center of our ending. Sienna looked at me. Do you ever think about the roof? Yes. How often? Less. She absorbed that. Good. I still hate helicopters turning away from me. Her eyes filled slightly. I'm sorry. I know. She had already apologized more than once. There was nothing useful in making her say it forever. So I asked instead, what do you think about when you remember it? The moment Jonas said we should complete your pickup. Not Damon's call. Not landing at Riverbend. That moment. Why that one? Because that was the last clean exit. I understood. Before she turned the aircraft, she still had a chance to make the right decision without anyone being harmed. After that, every decision became damage control. She looked toward the courthouse doors. I used to think accountability meant accepting what happened after you made a mistake. And now? It starts earlier. She gave a small shrug. Knowing when somebody else should have the decision before you make it. That was probably the lesson she would carry back into the cockpit. I hoped it kept someone alive someday. We said goodbye in the parking lot. No embrace. No promise to meet for coffee. I watched her walk to her car. Then I stopped myself from watching until she drove away. Some habits needed a deliberate ending. 6 weeks later, her name appeared on my operations board. Holston, Sienna, line captain. Restricted command authority. She had passed the independent check ride. Janice approved her return. Under the conflict structure Hollis and I had agreed to, I didn't assign her aircraft, approve her releases, or evaluate her performance. The system kept us apart where it needed to. Her first flight back was a training mission. Her second transported a medical team. Her third was a nighttime search for 2 hunters stranded after an early snowstorm. I knew only what I needed to know as director of operations. She launched. She completed the mission. She returned. No special report. No private message. That was how it should have been. Then in late November, Belmere got another flood warning. Not remotely as severe as the one that destroyed Pump 4. Still enough rain upstream to send the river over several rural roads. Crosswind activated 2 aircraft. Sienna was scheduled on Rescue 5. I saw her name on the board at 4:48 p.m. For 1 second, my chest tightened. Then Marta said, 5 requesting release. I looked toward Janice. The release belonged to her. She reviewed the mission and approved it. I did nothing. That was my job. Sometimes the correct use of authority was refusing to reach for it. Rescue 5 launched at 4:53. Its assignment involved an elderly couple trapped on the second floor of a farmhouse after the access road washed out. At 5:26, dispatch received a competing request. A county infrastructure engineer needed transport to a damaged water control site 12 miles south. Important. Not life safety. I watched the queue update. The old version of Sienna might have considered the engineer's strategic value. The new system didn't need to guess what any pilot considered. Life Safety 1 remained first. Rescue 5 continued to the farmhouse. At 5:41, Sienna reported both residents aboard. At 5:52, they were delivered to the shelter landing zone. Only then did dispatch assign the infrastructure transport. Rescue 5 accepted it. After refueling, nothing dramatic happened. Nobody argued. No one needed to invoke the mission challenge rule. The priority system simply worked. I sat behind the operations glass and realized my hands were steady. Marta glanced at me. You okay? Yes. She looked at the board. Then she understood. Good flight. Normal flight. That's better. She was right. At 7:14, Rescue 5 returned. I was leaving the operations room when Sienna came through the crew entrance. We stopped several yards apart. She still looked different without chief pilot insignia. Less decorated. Not smaller. Good mission, I said. Thanks. Farmhouse pickup looked clean. It was. She hesitated. You saw the engineer request. Yes. So did I. I waited. She said, I started thinking about whether getting him to the control site could prevent a bigger problem. I understood why she was telling me. What did you do? Nothing. A faint smile appeared. Because it wasn't my decision. That must have been painful. You have no idea. I laughed. So did she. Then she looked through the glass at the dispatch board. Turns out the queue can think without me. Remarkable. She smiled again. There was warmth between us. It no longer felt dangerous. She adjusted the flight bag on her shoulder. I should go. Yeah. Take care, Reed. You too. She walked toward the locker room. I went the other direction. That was the last time we spoke for several months. Not because we were angry, but because there was finally nothing left demanding an answer. Crosswind kept flying. Sienna remained a line captain. I heard through Janice that she became almost irritatingly strict about dispatch verification. That made me smile. My own role changed too. I stopped treating procedures as something designed mainly for less experienced people. The flood had taught me that the people most likely to need a boundary were often the people most convinced they knew where the boundary should move. Including me. Pump Station 4 was never rebuilt in the same location. The county replaced it with a new structure farther uphill, above the revised floodplain. The old site became an empty concrete pad beside the river. One spring afternoon, almost a year after the flood, I drove past it on the way back from an inspection. The river was low. Grass had begun growing through cracks around the remaining foundation. I pulled over for a minute. I stood where the access road used to be and looked toward the place where the roof had collapsed. I could still remember the searchlight hitting me. The helicopter hovering close enough that rescue felt certain. Then turning away. That memory would probably never become harmless. It didn't have to. I had spent months thinking recovery meant reaching someday when the choice no longer mattered. Instead, it became something I could remember without letting it decide what came next. A helicopter crossed high above the river, too far away to identify. I watched it for a few seconds. It kept moving straight across the sky. I got back into my truck. Crosswind had 6 aircraft flying that afternoon. None belonged to Sienna. None belonged to me. They belonged to the missions they had been released to perform. That was how it should have been from the beginning. I pulled onto the highway and drove back toward Belmere. This time, when rotor noise faded behind me, I never looked back. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe and support us.